I think the way I would define fan service would be like things that are thrown into the film to like bring back nostalgia for fans, or to make them feel something close to the characters.
To listen to what the fans want and they try and implement that into their film, into their work.
I would define good fan service as something that fans can appreciate, something they can identify, something they're familiar with, that doesn't sort of sacrifice any plot elements or creativity or overall quality of a project.
It's when fan service is listened to, but it doesn't completely take over the creative team's vision, when they implement it in a way that it's fun and it's just that little hint, that little rush of nostalgia that fans can experience, rather than letting fans control the whole plot, the whole story.
The most positive example of fan service that I could think of would be the use of the 3 Spider-Men in the most recent Spider-Man film, No Way Home, because it brought back a lot of memories of like good times with some of my favourite films.
So whenever they had the opportunity of incorporating them into the Marvel multiverse, they listened to what the fans wanted, and it made for a really successful film. It's probably one of the highest grossing, most talked about Marvel films since Endgame.
An adaptation that hasn't happened yet that I'm looking forward to would be Michael Keaton's return as Batman in The Flash.
I'm Batman.
Because I really enjoy Michael Keaton as Batman in his 2 films that he's already done, and I'm excited to see what's happened with that character since.
I think that a negative example of fan service is some of the other recent Marvel films in the MCU, with specifically like the cameos that they keep throwing in.
They're always just bringing in a familiar character just so you can point in the screen and go, wow.
I don't think they're very useful. I don't think they add a lot to the film. It's just, wait, look, there's a character here, or oh, we mentioned the X-Men and we put in an old theme, which, you know, some people would be excited, but for me it wasn't very good.
I feel like fan service is mostly executed not in the greatest way, just done because they can do it. So if it sacrifices quality, plot, in favour of just showing everyone's favourite characters, you know, they could do better. They've got the budget. They can do it in a way that is, you know, a bit more profound and interesting rather than just because they can.
Worst example that I've seen is the Dear Evan Hansen film, which was adapted from the stage musical. I would say that Ben Platt was probably a bit too old to play the part of a 16-year-old high school student. He was in his 30s at the time, and it didn't really look good on screen, and it didn't really translate well. So although it's something that the fans wanted, it ultimately was the wrong choice, and it really let down the film, I think.
I think nostalgia does affect the way movies for fans are made, because throwing in like an old theme or something can be so like enticing for the audience. Like even in a trailer, like for example, I like Jurassic Park, and like hearing the Jurassic Park theme in the Jurassic World films is like, it brings back a lot of memories.
You didn't come out all this way just to catch up now, did you?
You coming or what?
But I don't think it's necessarily needed, because they do that then for 3 films in a row, and what's the point when you can, you know, try and expand your universe, try and make something new instead of playing it so safe.
We've seen like so many requels being made. Most of them, in fairness, are actually pretty good. So take 2021's Ghostbusters Afterlife. We brought back all the original Ghostbusters. It was fairly well received. I enjoyed it. I think it was pretty effective in a good way. But on the other hand, just doing it for the sake of it sometimes in other films might not work so much.
Going back to Grace, that getting that original actor in who was in the original Grace film, it almost ties everything together in a way, kind of bridges the gap and allows for that older audience to get that hit of nostalgia in the film, and also allows for the newer audience to be able to go back and watch that original film and experience that nostalgia that the other audience were going on about in their reviews and on Twitter and Facebook and everything.
I think things thrown in for the fandom can take away from creativity, because you're not focusing as much on a sole story as well with a character that you're building yourself. You're bringing a lot of things back and rehashing a lot of things. It's like an attempt at nostalgia. But yeah, it's just like bringing music back or something from a previous character, for me, doesn't then set this new character apart from them. It's just, we've done the same thing, it's copy and paste.
I think that fan demand can detract from creativity. So take John Krasinski appearing as Reed Richards in Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness. Everyone was like, wanted that to happen, and then they just and they did it just to sort of kill him off straight away with no real impact. But I think sometimes it is for the best. Sometimes what fans want, when it does become a reality, it ends up making a really good thing.
If you just solely rely on what fans want rather than coming up with new creative ideas, then you'll kind of be stuck going in a loop, won't you? So rather than just reusing, rehashing the same things, probably in a similar way that Disney does now, where they just remake old nostalgic films rather than coming up with new stories.
I think fans manage their expectation based on previous films and the film we're getting. So it's like they think, say because of the Spider-Man film, No Way Home, I think they think because we got cameos in that, we need it in everything. And then they're like, oh, I like this character as well. Can we bring in a previous iteration of that character? People
just automatically expect that it's going to happen. So yeah, I do think it does, because everyone's talking about it, they just assume that it will happen, whether they should or shouldn't. And when it doesn't happen, they get all angry on social media and everything, so yeah.
We're getting the old Batman from 1989 in the Flash movie. It's like, hopefully it'll be good, but do we need that? Can we move on without going back to the past? Because I don't think it really benefits the new stories and the new characters that we're getting by rehashing old things.
Like when it came to Spider-Man No Way Home, the whole talking point of the film that generated so much buzz and so much hype was if the two original Spider-Men were going to make an appearance in the film. If it had have been the case where they weren't in the film, I think the reception of the film would have went a completely different direction than if they weren't. So it's probably not a good idea to rely on fan service.
I don't think fandoms can be completely trusted with things, with creative input. Sometimes people, you see a lot of fan fictions that are just ridiculous and nonsensical and just stupid, that shouldn't probably exist. So yeah, I think best leave the professionals to do what they do. Not saying they always do it the right thing, sometimes they should listen to the fans, but yeah, I think there's a line, and I think fans should stick to being fans for the most part.
I think fandoms can be trusted with creative choices to some extent, but I think if it was solely to go off what the fandom wanted, it would take away from everything. We wouldn't get anything new, basically.
I think that a lot of people who are quite actively involved in fandoms tend to be quite creative people. You know, you see quite a lot of artwork and stories based around different characters and plot points from a certain franchise. On rare occasions it can be better than what has actually been produced so far. So I think letting fans imagine what comes next and letting the discourse in fandoms about what might happen next in the franchise can generate some good ideas and some good different ways to take the plot and take the story.
In terms of quality of adaptations, I think fan service and the fandom's involvement has a negative effect on the film, because for the most part it's just forget the structure of the film, forget the plot, throw something in, see if it works. Yeah, it might make a few people feel happy for a bit. It's like, oh, I saw my favourite character. But in the end of the day, we're forgetting the story, we're forgetting to develop the new things, and we're focusing too much on making a few people happy instead of making a good film.
It can be perceived as just doing it because they can, or it can be perceived as just delivering on what people want which gains a positive reaction. So I think, yeah, it all depends on how it's done.
Fan service is good in terms of generating more hype and positive reviews, but in terms of creativity and actually leading the plot and creating new narratives, I think it can be more detrimental than good to let the fans' expectations control your entire idea for your franchise.